Heyo, and welcome back to Professor Layton and the Curious Village. In the last part, we had quite a twist of events, a sudden bombshell fall on us, in that after we'd been out traversing the town, completing puzzles, and ultimately just looking for Lady Dahlia's oddly aggressive cat Claudia, we found her, we took her back to the manor, and we found that one of the staffers of the manor, Simon, had been found dead. And on top of that, we are a suspect for some reason, which is just fantastic, exactly what we need when we're just trying to be useful. And that seems like the kind of thing that's going to get in our way, given we're trying to pursue the treasure, we're trying to pursue the golden apple. This is exactly what we needed. But yeah, what we just saw there was a photograph of Lady Dahlia with some other people from the village. We saw, forget her name actually, the lady who we saw on the way in. But that's not important just yet. What's showing up first is a puzzle, 5 suspects, given to us by Chelmy. And this one, I will say this, I don't think I did get this when I first played this. This is one where you have to read very closely into what they're saying and think about what each one is saying and how that discounts the others. Because you gotta just find whoever's telling the truth there, and that'll tell you how many people there are. And ultimately, what you've got to bear in mind is that given they all have different answers about who's telling the truth, like they can't all be telling the truth if they all contradict each other. So yeah, that's pretty much the trick there, and I think I managed to confuse myself when I first played this, and I can't remember what I thought the answer was, but you know, I didn't get it right, which is, you know, that's kind of the big deal of it. You either get it right or you get it wrong, and everything else is just, you know, not that important, all things considered. But yes, in terms of the current events, we've obviously found out that Simon's been killed, and there appears to be somebody missing from the manor. And that person we established towards the end of the last part is Ramon. He was the gentleman who was waiting outside by the boat on our way in. He was the one who gave us that puzzle about like how many people can stay on the boat and how many of them drown or something a little bit messed up like that. He was also the guy who had that hee-hee or hoo-hoo kind of vocal tick to all his dialogue, which honestly, we don't know if he committed the murder. We don't know whether he was involved in any way at all. But, you know, that in itself kind of justifies him getting a slap on the wrist at the very least. That I could see if he were talking out loud, if there were voice acting in this situation, then it would be a lot more annoying. Thankfully, it's a text-based game. So, we're going to start asking questions now about the photograph of Lady Dahlia, and this is kind of an interesting point that tells you a little bit about Baron Reinhold's character, the gentleman who died and left the fortune, because what we're finding out now is that actually isn't Lady Dahlia, that was his last wife before her. And so, you know, like, I understand having a type. I think every man has a type, but there's a difference between having an interest in like maybe a certain appearance or a certain personality type or whatever, and wanting to move on to someone who is exactly identical. That's a little bit curious. I'm not good at being subtle with this kind of things, but yes, we have got that added onto our list of mysteries now. And the list of mysteries, it doesn't really mean too much. You're not gonna have to pay too much attention to collecting them. They just sort of add to your list as you go along the plot, and it starts raising more and more questions. But it's basically just the little factors that move the plot along. But yes, somehow or other, the cat has managed to find Simon's glasses, and this seems like it'll be quite a major point in the case, so we should probably give it to Chelmy here and see how he reacts. You know, you should probably actually look into this, Chelmy. Like, I know that your pride won't let you take advice or even tips from Layton. You want to solve this case yourself, you want to be better than us. But, you know, ultimately your job is to solve the fucking crime, not to one-up this posh guy with a top hat. But this little exchange here, this is actually a bit of characterization that shows up quite a bit throughout the game. We've seen a little bit already, but it's going to become quite a recurring trend. That is why I like the dynamic between Layton and Luke so much. And that is that Layton himself is essentially a flawless character. He's smart, he's polite, he's just flat out a true gentleman, like the quintessential gentleman. He does everything the right way. Whereas Luke, he looks up to Layton and he aspires to be like Layton. But he's not there yet. You know, sometimes he'll say something that a true gentleman might think but not necessarily say out loud, like he was being critical of Chelmy just then. And it was up to Layton, who has to be the bit of guidance that's like the subtle, pay it no heed son kind of character. So he really does have that, Luke that is, he really has that vibe of fitting Layton's apprentice role very well. I feel like that's very important with this kind of thing, because both of these character types, and yeah, I will say I'm not talking too much about that puzzle because that's a very basic, just find out which one you can draw with a single line, and there's another one like it later. But yeah, both of these character types do have the potential to possibly be annoying if they're not handled right. And that's a very important distinction here, because Layton as the perfect, flawless character, that's limiting in what you can do with himself, because a perfect character doesn't necessarily have flaws they need to overcome. There's not really as much room for character development over the course of a story, so what you do with the storytelling is more about how you use him rather than what you can do to him in a certain way. Like, it's kind of a complex thing. I'm sure there's writers out there who could explain this much better than I could. But yeah, so it's very important to use him in a way that doesn't let his perfection get in the way. And it's also important to use Luke in the right way as well, because Luke is kind of a fanboy. Or at least he would be if he wasn't actively being taught by Layton. And having that, like, tutor and apprentice dynamic helps balance them both out, really. They sort of balance off each other, so where they would be flawed by flawlessness in Layton's case and flawed by just being a fanboy kid in Luke's case, so they kind of cover for each other in a way. And it feels like this has been done very intentionally. And the reason I say that is that there's very few points in the game. In fact, I don't actually recall any points in the entire game where they're separate. Whenever Luke's in a situation, Layton is also there. Same thing, vice versa. So it just feels like they've deliberately written them to play off each other like that. But this puzzle here, puzzle 31, Racetrack Riddle, this is another puzzle that tries to trick you out with too much information or distracting information. Because the information it tells you is how many laps a horse can do within a single minute. But what it's actually asking you for is how many minutes will it take until they're all at the starting line, which it's gonna be just the 1 minute, because they all complete a certain number of laps in that 1 minute. So regardless of whether the horse goes around 2, 3 or 4 times, it's still gonna be there at the end of that minute. So yeah, that's quite a basic one when you spell it out, but again, it's a game of not reading too much into what it tells you and more just thinking around it. And yes, we are back in this little shack. I think it's meant to be a shop, but there's never anyone in there serving, unless there's someone tucked away in that little section there. I'm not entirely sure. But this here is puzzle 32, Sweet Jars, and this is a probability puzzle. So you have 10 jars filled with 50 sweets each, and you're trying to get half a jar in each bag. And ultimately, it's gonna be what you think. The first answer that comes to your head when you read that out, it's all of them. Like, all of them are gonna have that perfect split. If you're doing half and half, then it's all gonna work out like that. You know, it's probability puzzles are some of the easier ones in my eyes, at least with my personal math skills. Like, I'm talking, they're some of the easier out of the maths ones, which are the more difficult ones. I should probably do like a kind of hierarchy with how confusing I'm making this, but I just kind of feel like that's a more basic kind of mathematical process. And I say, in terms of the maths puzzles that I can do, or at least that I think I can do, it's statistics are the ones I'm best with. I can look through all my stats, I can figure out what means what. I'm okay with that, and I suppose these days doing YouTube for a living, I look through all my views and my watch time and all that kind of stuff, and I've got the same sort of mindset that I had back in school with that sort of thing, of understanding how graphs and data entry in general works. And then probability, then pure mathematics as the hardest for me. But here's another trick one, and this is brilliant, because you've got to decide what you're going to light first. And obviously, you're going to have to light the match before you can light anything else. That is kind of genius, and I did actually figure that one out myself, I will say. And I was kind of proud of myself for getting that one, because I saw through the ruse. And that guy holding that match like that while staring at me, I'm not entirely too comfortable about that. But who am I to judge? I'm not exactly a looker myself. Although I would imagine maybe Looker himself might have a bit more luck with this sort of stuff. Like, Looker as a character, Looker from Pokemon, he is an international police detective. So he's got some qualifications behind him, but he also seems a little bit out of it when you talk to him a lot of the time. I don't know, like, I do like his little post-game quest in X and Y, and he showed up a few times aside from that as well, but we'll get to that in the Pokemon Y playthrough soon enough, I'm sure. And it seems like word is getting out about the murder. We probably should have kept that under wraps just to avoid a massive kind of outbreak of tension and fear. 'Cause, you know, that's part of the thing of, like, there's reporting on the news, and you should probably get more information about it before you start letting whisper spread. Because otherwise you will get widespread panic. But, you know, I don't have experience with covering a murder case. Maybe they know better than me, or maybe certain people just can't keep their gob shut. I don't know. But also, in terms of rumours, we're now finding out that there are rumours about that big scary tower. This one here. Because it seems to be a talking point within the village that people are uncomfortable around the tower. They don't like going in there. They actively stay away from there. And apparently it also makes a lot of noise overnight, which we'll get told more and more about. Or it just makes a lot of noise in general, as far as I recall, but yeah. Up next is Puzzle 34, and I've said before that I'm usually the best at the visual ones, but this stumped me. What you've got to do is you've got to work out at the highest point of this stack of sheets, how many are there on top of each other? And the answer is 5, but it takes a lot of close looking and, in my case, giving up and looking it up for this one, because you can do it, but I don't know, just looking at all the layers there, like you can see on the diagram on the left there, that the highest point is that one section near the middle where there's 5 sheets on top of each other. It was a little bit much for me. Yes, don't worry, Percy, we will come back for your puzzles. And I think in terms of the strange gizmos, we're actually getting a lot closer. I think it might actually be this chapter where we complete the Totally Not Robot Dog, actually. So, you know, we're making progress in building it. We're making progress in finding out what the robot dog actually is. And now we're going back to this Rodney guy. And this Rodney guy, I quite like him actually, not as a person, because he looks like he'd be really annoying to work around, but he's a bit too deep in his bureaucracy. He's the one who always wants a form filled in or just some paperwork done, and everything has to be done by the book. And when you mix that with a love of puzzles, you know, it seems like it could get a little bit annoying. But here is Puzzle 44 Stamp Stumper. This one is a more basic maths puzzles, pure mathematics, so, you know, it's not my strength, but what you got to do is you've got to break this collection of stamps down into portions so that each little portion adds up to 100. I'm not sure exactly what kind of stamps these are. I kind of, like, as someone who very rarely sends snail mail, I don't know how much I would expect to pay for a stamp these days. It's been years since I've went out and bought stamps. I think they're climbing up in price, but, like, I don't post anything. I have no real need to. Anyone I need to get in contact with, I either can email, or they're ones where I'm like sending information back that's been prepaid. Or I'm following up my newest, incredibly petty hobby, I will admit. But I've found that when you get all these junk mail letters coming through, the ones that are from companies trying to sell you shit, and this is advice I read online actually, and it seems to be working pretty well so far. But if you just return to sender anything, then it costs them at the other end, and that's the discouragement that they need to take you off of their list. So I've made a habit now of when I get a letter through that's just trying to sell me shit, I'll just write unsolicited mail, return to sender, and put it back in the post box. And then that's on them now, and I'm so happy I read that, because it appeals to both my love of fucking over people who try to annoy me, and also I just get to be really petty and a little shit about it, and I am more than happy to do that. But here we have Puzzle 58, Get the Ball Out 1. And as you can tell from the 1 in the puzzle name, there's going to be a few of these show up over the course of the game. And I will say, these are the ones where I am going to have to apologise in advance, because these do take me a little while to record. They're not the sort of ones that I can quickly do by glancing over at the guide. They're the ones that I have to read an instruction, do it, look back at the guide, and when I'm trying to filter it through from a paragraph of text on the screen, I am a little bit slow in reading that. So that one was quite a simple one, but when they get harder, you can expect me to take a little while in doing it. I will say I do like these particular puzzles in concept. They're fun to do on your own when you're not trying to record it in an efficient manner. because they're the sort of ones that you can trial and error, and being able to just like move the blocks around and try to get it to the end, that is really cool. And it's also really satisfying when you see that you're a few steps ahead and you can kind of just finish it off. You can kind of know what you're doing and you know what moves you got to make next. When you're toward the end of those puzzles, that's when they feel really satisfying to pull off. But as we saw a quick preview of in the last part, this is Granny Riddleton's shack. And what you need to know about Granny Riddleton's shack is each of the puzzles in the game, or the optional puzzles in the game, they have a cut-off point where they disappear from the overworld. So if there's a certain character you have to talk to, a certain flag to unlock the puzzle and play it, then that will have a cut-off point, like a certain chapter where you have to have completed that puzzle by before it will disappear. But if it disappears, then you can come over to Granny Riddleton here, and she'll have the puzzle in her shack, and you can complete it after the fact. So if you do miss any puzzles along the way, and you want to come back and maybe 100% the game, or you just want to try out the puzzles just for the fun of it, you can do that. It's a neat little feature, not one that I had to make use of, given I was using the strategy wiki guide to show me where the puzzle prompts were. But for a lot of the puzzles throughout the game, you normally get like 2 or 3 chapters grace period. So it might be that a puzzle shows up from chapter 2, and then you've got up to chapter 4 to complete it, for example. So you do get a little bit of leeway if you just want to explore the town and talk to everyone. But like I say, if you miss any along the way, then you can just come back here and she'll have them. And this is another character like Stash and Scarf, and that, as far as I know, does show up more and more over the course of the series, which makes sense given she is actively providing a function here. Although it does mean that she does travel around a lot, which for someone at her age, I'm not sure if, you know, actually to be fair, like if she's retired and she's got nothing else to do, she might as well travel the world with her creepy little puzzle shack. And that was a giant crash. Like, sir is one of the most polite things we could call you, Paulie. But yeah, like I was saying in the last part, actually, I do really like Paulie, and this irrational rage over just a polite introduction is, like, it's just so Paulie. He doesn't even know what he's mad about. Like, I love it so much. Like, what a great character. Yeah, I think we'd kind of pieced that one together ourselves. It's going to be coming from the giant creepy tower that doesn't even look structurally sound. Like, I'm sure that if you've got random rooms just sort of hanging off the side of what's a very thin built tower, that's probably not going to stay balanced too well, so we've just got to rely on the fantasy and the art style to kind of hold everything together here. But now we're going back to this restaurant, and I think you can kind of guess what kind of puzzle we're going to be getting from the owner here, because he's one of these characters that has a very specific kind of puzzle. In the last time we were here, we had a juice picture puzzle, and he's going to be playing the same role again, just not with juice, it's going to be with milk pictures. I will say this will become a recurring thing. I think I'm going to save some of the more, like, off-topic kind of stuff that we need to talk about, like, you know, voice acting and just general trivia about the game, information or whatnot, until the next time we come here. Because next time we come here, both him and the customer in the shop have a whole series of the same kind of puzzles. And while I'm happy to do blow-by-blow commentary, just going through puzzle by puzzle when the puzzles are unique. I don't really want to be doing that for puzzles that are 8 in a row of basically the same, because I feel like that might get a little bit on the dull side. So yeah, this is just the same deal again. Each one of them, there's an optimal run, and there's the trial and error optimal run. There we go. That wasn't too bad, but you can probably imagine they're going to get harder over time, just because that's the nature of the Beast Wiz kind of thing. And that's okay, but it means that the whole trial and error element of it does really ramp up in the later ones if you're not... Like, I'm not sure what kind of skill you would have to figure that out. I guess to a certain degree it's a mathematical thing of just planning ahead, of thinking if I pour this one into here, then it will subtract this many litres from the bigger one. But again, I feel like even people who are more mathematically sound would trial and error that at least a fair bit, just because it's easier to do it that way. You can try and work it out just by counting how many litres you have left, but, you know, you're not really going to do that. You're going to do it the easier way. And here's old Nick or Flick teasing us that he doesn't have a puzzle quite yet, but he will have a lot later. Like, later in the evening when we come back here, he will have quite a lot, just like the gentleman who does the whole milk picture things. And what has this guy who was irrationally scared of a cat earlier got to say? So yeah, in terms of progression, there's not that many mandatory puzzles that you have to do, all things considered. Like, a lot of these ones that I'm doing along the way are optional. But there are occasional cut-off points where you have to have completed so many. Like, to get past here, we have to have completed at least 12 puzzles. And I believe that you'll have most likely done that by the time you get here. But this puzzle here, Strange Dots, the trick is that it's positions on the clock face. You look at how you've got the 3, 6, 9 and 12, and once you've figured that out, then you can piece together the rest of it. So like, we have had clock puzzles already, and there might be a few more coming up, but this one, it's a little bit different because it doesn't explicitly introduce itself as a clock puzzle. You've just got to be familiar with the concept of a traditional analog clock to know how to approach it. But really, I will say, analog clocks, I actually don't look at an analog clock face that much, so it's a sort of dying craft, both the puzzles and the clock faces themselves. Like, I will say, a bit of a prank that I've been getting into in recent times is whenever my old man has like a Christmas or birthday coming up, I have on a couple of occasions bought him novelty clocks to put around the house. Like, I found one that was like a mirror image of a traditional clock, so it kind of ticks around backwards. And that is a complete fucking trip to look at. And it kind of did fuck with him for quite a little while, just having that up in the kitchen, and he'd look at the time and it'd take a minute just to work it out. And I gave him a couple of years to get used to that and just learn that he's looking at what's essentially a left-handed clock. And then I've got him another one to replace it with, that instead of being a mirror flip, it's goes the same way as a traditional clock, except it's upside down, so like 12 is at the bottom, 6 is at the top. And that might be a little bit evil, but you know, like, that is a fun way to... Because it's not just him, but whenever someone comes over and they want to look at what the time is, you just glance over at the clock, as you normally do, and they start to work it out, and then it hits them that, you know, the clock's upside down, and they suddenly don't know what to do about it. And yeah, I'm a little bit mean, if you can't tell.
Layton's apprentice saves the day.
But yes, that was a puzzle about a mouse, it gives you all the details of how long it takes a mouse to breed. And then the trick is that there's only one mouse there, and the mouse can't breed with itself. That is honestly kind of fun. I think I did actually figure that one out by myself, but I was kind of not sure whether they'd be doing that. I just saw like, but there's only one mouse there. Is that it? That seems a bit obvious. Because they had already trained me with the mindset by that point of, you know, don't let the additional information distract you. But this is another kind of puzzle that's quite popular around the world. I've seen a lot of puzzles like this before where like you can buy the little toys that are like this where you have to rearrange the pieces to form a particular puzzle just by moving them either up, down, left or right. It looks really complicated and it actually is quite a complicated puzzle to solve. I feel like if I was trying to trial and error this, I would just get annoyed with it, which is why I did just look up the guide and find the optimal route to do this. It's cheating what I'm doing with it, but at the same time, this is not the kind of puzzle that I would have fun with. So I decided for the sake of progressing my gameplay along, I would just, you know, take the L and look it up. I think I did have a little panel thing like that when I was younger. I don't know whether I bought it or whether it might have actually been like a Christmas cracker kind of thing. It seems like the sort of gimmicky thing they were putting one of them. Like you get that, you get the little hair clip things, maybe one of the tiny packs of playing cards. Which are honestly kind of funny because I doubt anyone's ever going to have a practical game with tiny playing cards. That seems like it'll get really annoying. Like, I do like the big print ones, or at least a standard size, you know, like a typical poker deck. That's a comfortable size to hold in your hand. But, you know, I suppose you get them really cheap in a Christmas cracker, and quite often, if you're going around someone else's house, you haven't paid for the crackers, so fuck it, free playing cards. But hey, another maths puzzle here. This, ultimately, you just look at what possibilities and you kind of discount them one by one until you realise that they're the same age. These two siblings are twins. So your answer is 6 for both of them.
Every puzzle has an answer.
And that one is an intentional trial and error puzzle because what you would have to do is you would have to find somewhere to make a wild guess and then you would discount all the options that are not the case. Like once you've fed them through this little process that kind of eliminates all the false ones. Oh goody, Jarvis is a layabout. This is what happens when you don't have a serious adult video game job like I have. I'm clearly in a position to put myself on a pedestal above someone else who's unemployed. Though to be fair, I'm not unemployed technically now, but I would still like to get a real job eventually. And oh god, that dog is coming close to completion now. I think all that's left is like an ear. There might be another odd little bit off to the side that I didn't notice there, but it looks like the only part that didn't have an outline was an ear. I didn't see whether he had the nose there or not actually, so there might be a nose left, but we're getting closer to completing this dog. I swear Agnes here is fucking everywhere. Like we saw her hanging out by where Ramon's meant to be earlier on, and she gave us a puzzle there, and now she's just loitering here. She seems like the kind of character who just wanders around and just waiting for someone to give a puzzle to. But this puzzle here, island hopping, this one I believe I did actually get myself by just what you got to do is find a position where you can put a single bridge to make it the case that you can visit every island once on your way to point B. And it's just that point in the middle there where you got to put a diagonal bridge in, and then it makes it possible. All I really did there was just hover the stylus above the 3DS screen and just draw out all the possible routes, and that was the one that ticked all the boxes. So this was quite a simple puzzle, but it's also kind of neat to be able to just take a trip across not Alola like that. Alola's on my mind because I've been recording Pokemon Sun for my non-commentary channel, FC Playthroughs. And I've been getting back into Pokemon Sun. I'll say Moon didn't really blow me away on my first playthrough, but going back to it now and trying out a different team. Oh, we didn't get the tongue either, so it's just the tongue which we just got, then the nose, then the ears. But yeah, I'm kind of liking my revisit to Pokemon Sun. This is probably the sort of tangent I should save for the Pokemon Y playthrough I have ongoing, but I've never been great at staying completely focused. And here, similar to her first puzzle that was a one-line puzzle, we also have one-line puzzle 2. And this is another kind of puzzle that you can complete by just like hovering the stylus above the touchscreen, or yeah, that would have been the touchscreen actually, because I've had to arrange it so that the touchscreen is the one on the right, given that's what makes sense here. And I don't know, like some games on the DS prioritise the top screen. This is very much a case of it prioritises the bottom screen. But yeah, that's the one that you can't do with a single line, because you would have to go and draw the line across on the top part of the hat, as well as the brim at the bottom. So yeah, again, like just try each of them and just see what works. And this is where I should probably talk about the other element in this game that, like mechanically speaking, that I haven't covered yet. And that is the Pickerats system. And all you really need to know is that Pickerats are a kind of scorer. But they're a useful way that the game has to penalise you for guessing. Because if you think, like, when it's the pick one of 4 kind of puzzles like we just had, if you didn't want to figure out the puzzles, then you could just guess. Like, you would just keep on guessing until you got the right one, because process of elimination, eventually you're bound to get it, you know? But what happens is each time you get a puzzle wrong, when you retry it, it's worth fewer Pickerats. So if you would say, for example, possibly get 50 Pickerats from getting a puzzle right first time, then the next time you try it, it will be a lower value, and it'll just keep getting lower and lower until you get it right. So if you see someone and they've got a lot of Pickerats in their playthrough, that means they got a lot of them right on their first attempt. If they don't have many, it means that they were either getting puzzles wrong a lot or they were guessing.
That should do it.
Though I'm not in a position to imply anyone's some kind of puzzle scrub for not having many Pickerats, given I did look up quite a few of these puzzles. This one in particular was a bit of a sensory overload to me, because I figured out what you're supposed to do. What you're supposed to do is follow the line along and count how many of the coins would be above the line and how many are below it, or just particularly how many would be above it, because that's the answer you're looking for. But actually following through with it and doing it, that was a little bit much. I didn't really have the commitment to follow the line, purely because of how complex the line is. It's not just a few little squiggles here and there. It like really goes in on itself a lot, and ain't nobody got time for that, if I'm being honest. But this gentleman here, I quite like his design because it's inherently amusing to me. How large his jawline and his nose are compared to the rest of the body. And I will say I like this about Professor Layton's art style on the whole, in that the characters, a lot of them do have completely off-whack proportions in general. But that's an intentional thing, it's an art style choice, and it adds a lot of character to, well, the characters. One of the things that sticks out to me in particular are Professor Layton's eyes. Because you'll notice that he has the very basic dot eyes, just a black dot, which that in itself isn't that big of a deal. You know, a lot of cartoon characters do have very simplistic designs for their eyes, and they tend to keep it simple like that for a reason, just because it's easier than animating loads of different facial expressions using his eyes. But with Professor Layton, you'll notice that all the other characters around him have more complex eyes. Like Luke here has far more traditional cartoon eyes. He has the proper whites of his eyes. They're still quite simple, but you know, compared to Layton, it has a little bit more going on, and you can see him move his eyes in certain scenes just to show his expressions. And then you get characters like this wearing glasses, but you see in later media, like the anime series, if you see any of the promotional art for that, like Layton just has his black dot eyes, whereas other characters around him have anime eyes, really. So he is like, I guess you could say he's the exception to a rule there, but it doesn't ever look out of place, which is quite impressive to me, honestly, because you would think that having a character who looks so radically different in his design would look like it'd stick out like a sore thumb, but that's not the case. Layton just looks fine. But this puzzle here is ultimately a really convoluted way of saying that the father is twice the age of the son. So, like, once you figure that out, you can just work out that the father is 44, whereas the son is 22. It's not that complex of a puzzle, but again, reading between the lines, the gist of pretty much all of these puzzles here. But yeah, like I was saying about Professor Layton's eyes, I'm now seeing the son here has those dark eyes, but I wouldn't expect them to put as much detail into a throwaway character compared to the main characters that show up in the game. But it stood out to me when I was conferring with Nazu, the artist who drew the Professor Layton illustration in these video thumbnails, because he was asking me, like, do you want me to approach the eyes? How do you want me to approach them? And because, like, his traditional art style, if you look at the other pieces in his galleries, he tends to do much more complex characters. Like, he has a more anime art style, and this was quite a new thing to him, and he was wondering whether I wanted to adapt the eyes to his style. We kind of decided that we would keep Layton with the black dot eyes. He's made them a little bit bigger just to match his style, which I think looks really good. And I do have links to his galleries on both Sketchmob and Instagram in the description of the video. I would recommend you check out his artwork because some of it is really good. But yeah, I think he did a really good job of transposing this art style to his own. And yes, we did just finish off building the Gizmo dog. I decided to name him Fondue after the dog from Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure. Because as poorly as my display was of that game when I streamed it for the Segathon, I really like the game itself. I really like the characters in that game, and it's got a similar structure to Layton. It seems very inspired by it. Like, I wouldn't even say that it's just a similar style. I would say that it is the Layton structure, in that you follow the story around, you got the point and click elements. It's just, instead of solving puzzles, you play rhythm games. I like that game a lot. Maybe I'll do a proper playthrough of it one day, but we'll see. I don't want to commit to too much just yet. But this puzzle, one of the hidden puzzles, puzzle 101, splitting it up, is ultimately you've got to figure out how many of the pieces, once you've broken them up, would have red sides. And so it's a visualization puzzle with some smaller maths elements. There you go. It's not one that I can really explain too much about, I will say, but hey, I can only bring so much to these commentaries. I can't talk too much about basic concepts, otherwise it would get a little bit dull. What is your take on the situation, Zaponi? Or Zapone? There's a few of these characters I don't know how to pronounce their names. Obviously we had the guy we're looking for, Ramon, or Ramon. I'm not sure which it's meant to be. I've been going with Ramon. But there's him, and then there's the pony, and this guy is Gerard. I might just stick with fucking Humpty Dumpty. That's the design he's going for. His head is just an egg, let's be real. And he has another money-based puzzle for us. Puzzle 42, the camera and the case. And I will just say straight up, if a salesman doesn't give you a clear price, that should be a red flag to just walk away. No legitimate salesman is going to obscure the price they're charging for something. They will just say upright, up front, this is what it costs. But no, this guy Gerard has let himself get swindled by a guy selling a camera and a case separately. And let's be real here, that facial expression on the background character there, that tells you everything you need to know. You got swindled. Just like, you're gonna have to own that, buddy. You got fucked over, you got ripped off. Yeah, we are actually on the tail end of this chapter here, and I will say, although the chapters are quite long, I feel like there's a perfect balance between the story and the puzzles that ultimately make it not feel as long as it actually is. Like, for me recording this, I did condense it down, admittedly. Like, I didn't spend too long on too many of the puzzles. Although I'm showing them all off, I did try to get an efficient recording of each one, but even when you're just playing it casually, it doesn't really feel that long. It feels like you're keeping a consistent pace, so it's not offensive at all. The fact that these chapters tend to take like an hour to an hour and a half each. But here is the final puzzle of this chapter. Puzzle 43, 3 umbrellas, and this one's quite easy when you think about it. If 2 of them have taken the right umbrella, then the last person is obviously going to take their right umbrella. This is one of the things of, like, you could have one person to take the wrong one, and then it could fuck over someone else. But if both of the others have got the right one, then it's only the right one left. It's pretty easy when you clock onto it, but again, read it closely. That's the advice for pretty much all of these puzzles, and it stays true here. I'm not too sure about Lady Dahlia's characterization here, to be fair. Like, this little girl here is trying to say that she's probably nicer than she seems, but I'm not convinced. She does seem a little bit demanding, especially with how she treats Matthew, who really just seems like a nice guy just trying to do his job. And no, this guy doesn't have another picture puzzle for us just yet. He's gonna be our trigger for the end here. You only have one customer here, Crouton. Every time we come in here, it's just this one guy. You can't convince me you have other customers. We've already had Luke making the pot shots about how dead your business is. You know, I don't think your business is going to last too long. That's all I'm saying here. And I feel like we're getting sent on a bit of a goose chase here, because we've come down to the restaurant after, I think it was either Zapone or Gerard who suggested coming here, but he's saying we should go to the other calf because there's this other guy who might know something. We're just being sent all over the place and we still haven't found the missing servant yet, so how the chapter's concluding here, I don't really know, but we are now in St. Mystere at night, and as soon as we go through that door, we're going to see how beautiful St. Mystere appears at night. I will save more gushing over St. Mystere at night for the next chapter because we'll be spending a fair bit of it in that part. In fact, that's actually the longest chapter in the game coming up. So I will see you then for Chapter 4, Night Falls. Bye bye for now.